Have you ever felt like you were tiptoeing through life, constantly second-guessing yourself around someone, afraid that the slightest misstep might trigger an unpredictable reaction? Maybe you've noticed, almost imperceptibly, that you've stopped expressing certain thoughts, holding back parts of yourself, or altering your behavior in ways you never consciously chose. No one forced you. No explicit rules were laid out, yet somehow you've molded yourself to fit into an invisible framework, one that slowly erodes your identity. This is the insidious nature of narcissistic control. It doesn't announce itself with raised voices, overt threats, or clear ultimatums. Instead, it thrives in the quiet, through unspoken expectations, the weight of disapproval, and the slow suffocation of your personal freedom. The most unsettling part? It makes you feel like you are the architect of your own confinement. In this video, we're peeling back the layers of this psychological entrapment. We'll uncover the strategies narcissists use to dominate without a single command, explore why their tactics are so disturbingly effective, and examine why society so often misinterprets these dynamics, sometimes even blaming the victim for staying. If you've ever felt trapped in a relationship that looks perfectly fine from the outside, but leaves you feeling small, silenced, and emotionally depleted, you're not alone. By the end of this video, you'll not only see the reality of what's happening, you'll begin to reclaim the autonomy that was slowly taken from you. If this resonates with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Together we're uncovering the truth, breaking free from manipulation, and reclaiming our power. Let's get into it. Have you ever found yourself carrying the weight of every argument, every misunderstanding, every shift in someone's mood, wondering if somehow it's all your fault? If that thought has ever settled in your mind like an unshakable truth, you're not imagining things, you're not being too sensitive, you're not overreacting. What you're experiencing is the slow erosion of self, the hallmark of narcissistic control. Evaporated, the harmonicism is never far behind, and the most insidious part, it never announces itself. Narcissistic relationships don't begin with grand ultimatums or obvious power plays. They unfold quietly, like a tide pulling you out to sea before you even realize you're drifting. No one demands that you stop seeing your friends, change the way you dress, or silence your voice. But somehow, little by little, you do. You stop voicing your concerns because the last time you did, the backlash was unbearable. You decline invitations to family gatherings or nights out with friends, not because you want to, but because the tension afterward always makes it feel like a mistake. You begin adjusting your habits, what you eat, where you go, how you spend your money, not because they told you to, but because the unspoken disapproval is exhausting to endure. This is how narcissistic control works. Not through explicit rules, but through invisible barriers you learn not to cross. And the most disorienting part? It feels like it's your choice. You convince yourself, I'm just keeping the peace, I'm being considerate, I'm avoiding unnecessary conflict. But in reality, you are slowly relinquishing your freedom, not by choice, but by fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of the silent treatment, fear of feeling like you are the problem. This isn't just a difficult relationship, it's a cycle of psychological control. And if any of this feels familiar, it's not in your head. Narcissistic relationships are designed to make you question yourself, doubt your worth, and worst of all, believe that this is normal. Recognizing this pattern is the first step to breaking free. So let's go deeper. Let's expose the subtle yet devastating ways narcissists maintain control, all without saying a word. Stay with me because what you're about to learn may be the clarity you've been searching for. Now that we've uncovered the signs, it's time to dissect the core of the issue, the silent tactics narcissists use to control you. These aren't the dramatic, overt forms of manipulation we often imagine. They are much more subtle, designed to make you question your own reality. Let's break it down. When it comes to narcissistic control, the most dangerous methods are often the ones you don't even notice. Operating in the background, subtly shaping your thoughts, your actions, and ultimately your sense of self. Let's explore these 6 powerful tactics in depth to understand how they work and why they are so disturbingly effective. The first tactic, emotional conditioning. The power of reward and punishment. Imagine a dog being trained to follow commands. When it obeys, it gets a treat. When it disobeys, it faces consequences, whether a stern voice, withdrawal of attention, or something more severe. Over time, the dog learns not just what behaviors are expected, but also what actions will result in discomfort. It starts to self-regulate, not because it wants to, but because it has learned to associate certain choices with pain. Now, apply this to human relationships, specifically to a relationship with a narcissist. Except in this case, the conditioning isn't obvious. There are no treats, no clear commands, no explicit consequences. Instead, the narcissist shapes your behavior subtly, through an intricate system of unspoken rewards and punishments. At first, it's all rewards. They make you feel like the most special person in the world. They praise you, shower you with affection, and create an intoxicating sense of closeness. You feel seen, valued, and deeply connected, perhaps more than ever before. This is the love-bombing phase, and it serves a purpose. It gives you a taste of their approval, a high that you will unconsciously chase later on. But then, something shifts. Maybe you express a boundary, maybe you make a harmless joke, maybe you fail to meet an expectation you didn't even know existed. Suddenly, the warmth vanishes. The affection that felt so abundant is now scarce. They grow distant, cold, indifferent. You find yourself replaying the moment in your head, wondering what went wrong, desperate to get back to the version of them that made you feel so special. And then, just as suddenly as it left, their warmth returns, but only when you behave in ways that suit them, only when you adapt, adjust, and subtly mold yourself to avoid upsetting them. You learn, without ever being told, that certain behaviors bring connection, while others bring distance and discomfort. This is emotional conditioning, a powerful, insidious form of control. It doesn't require direct commands because it operates on a deeper level. Over time, you begin to anticipate their moods, avoiding actions that might trigger their withdrawal. You become hyper-aware of their emotional state, walking on eggshells without even realizing you're doing it. The brilliance of this tactic is that it feels self-imposed. The narcissist never has to say, "You're not allowed to bring up your feelings," or "You can't spend time with your friends." Instead, they simply react, through coldness, dismissiveness, or even subtle disappointment, until you learn to suppress your needs on your own. This kind of control is far more dangerous than overt demands, because it feels like your own decision. You tell yourself, "I'm just keeping the peace. I don't want to upset them. I should be more understanding." You rationalize the changes you make, believing you are choosing them, when in reality you are being trained. The effects of emotional conditioning run deep. Over time, you lose sight of where your choices end and their influence begins. You might start second-guessing yourself constantly, unsure of what will trigger disapproval. You may find yourself filtering your words, adjusting your tone, or even downplaying your own accomplishments because you've learned that too much independence threatens the fragile equilibrium of the relationship. Even worse, when the narcissist does offer moments of warmth, those brief glimpses of affection feel euphoric. The contrast between their indifference and their approval creates an addictive cycle. The lows are so painful that the highs feel like relief. The person who is causing your distress is also the only one who can soothe it, creating a psychological dependency that is incredibly difficult to break. This is why victims of narcissistic relationships often struggle to leave, even when they recognize the toxicity. It's not just about love. It's about a deep-seated pattern of reward and punishment, where the fear of losing their approval becomes stronger than the desire to assert one's own needs. And here's the hardest truth. The more you comply, the more control they gain. The more you suppress your feelings to keep the peace, the less you remember what it's like to advocate for yourself. The more you avoid conflict, the more power they wield over your choices. The more you chase their approval, the further you drift from your own identity. Breaking free from emotional conditioning requires conscious effort. It means recognizing that withdrawal of affection is not a reflection of your worth. It means resisting the urge to mold yourself into whatever version of you keeps them satisfied. It means reclaiming your voice, even when it feels uncomfortable or unnatural. The first step: pay attention to patterns. Notice how their warmth is tied to your compliance. Notice how you adjust yourself to avoid their coldness. Notice how often you feel like you're performing rather than simply being. Then begin to push back. Slowly, intentionally. Speak your mind even when their reaction makes you uneasy. Prioritize your needs even when it feels selfish. Allow discomfort to exist without rushing to fix it. Because in the end, true freedom isn't about keeping the peace with them. It's about reclaiming peace within yourself. Tactic 2. Gaslighting. The subtle art of making you doubt yourself. Imagine standing in a room, fully aware that the light is on, but someone you trust, insists that the room is actually dark. At first, you laugh it off. They must be joking. But they persist. They seem so certain. They tell you, you always exaggerate things, or you're just overthinking again. Soon you start questioning yourself. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I'm not seeing things clearly. This is gaslighting, the systematic manipulation of reality designed to make you doubt your own perception, memory, and even sanity. And when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, gaslighting is not just an occasional tactic. It's a way of life. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins subtly. You express how something they did made you feel hurt, and instead of acknowledging it, they respond with, "That never happened," or worse, "You're just being too sensitive." You remember a conversation where they promised something, but when you bring it up, they flatly deny it as if you imagined the whole thing. And when you insist, they sigh, shake their head, and say something like, "You always twist things." At first, you're frustrated. You know what you heard, you know what you saw. But the more it happens, the more you start to second-guess yourself. You begin keeping mental notes, replaying conversations in your head, or even secretly recording things. Anything to prove to yourself that you're not losing your mind. But here's the cruel brilliance of gaslighting. The moment you reach this point, you've already fallen into the trap. Because now, instead of focusing on their toxic behavior, you're focused on proving to yourself that you're not crazy. You're stuck in a loop where your own reality feels uncertain, and in that state of confusion, they gain complete control. The effects of gaslighting are devastating. Over time, you stop trusting yourself. You start looking to the narcissist for validation, because if your own memory and emotions are unreliable, surely they must know better. You become dependent on their version of reality, accepting their words over your own instincts. And once that happens, they can mold your world into whatever shape benefits them most. Gaslighting doesn't just distort your perception, it erodes your confidence, your sense of self, and your ability to stand up for yourself. You begin apologizing for things that aren't your fault. You downplay your emotions, convincing yourself that you're being too dramatic. You hesitate before speaking, wondering if your thoughts are even valid. The worst part, gaslighting isolates you. If you try to tell friends or family what's happening, they may not believe you, because the narcissist has already painted you as unstable, too emotional, or prone to misunderstanding things. Even if people do believe you, the exhaustion of constantly defending your reality can make you withdraw, choosing silence over another painful debate. And that's exactly what the narcissist wants. A person who doubts their own reality is easier to manipulate. A person who no longer trusts their own emotions is easier to control. A person who has no confidence in their memory, instincts, or self-worth is someone who will tolerate almost anything because they no longer believe they have the right to challenge it. So, how do you break free? The first step is recognition. Gaslighting thrives in silence and self-doubt. The moment you start noticing the patterns, you weaken its hold. If you find yourself constantly second-guessing your experiences, take a step back and ask, Would I question this if it were happening to someone else? Next, start trusting yourself again. Keep a journal. Write things down as they happen, so when they try to rewrite history, you have your own truth documented. Surround yourself with people who validate your experiences. Friends, therapists, or support groups who remind you that your feelings are real, your thoughts are valid, and your voice matters. Finally, stop engaging in their reality. You don't have to argue, prove yourself, or convince them that they are gaslighting you. That only keeps you trapped in their game. Instead, focus on grounding yourself in what you know is true. Your perception matters. Your emotions are real, and you do not need permission to trust yourself again. Gaslighting is designed to steal your power. Reclaiming it starts with one simple act: believing in yourself again. Tactic 3. Isolation, the silent strategy that traps you. Imagine a predator hunting its prey. It doesn't strike immediately. Instead, it waits, watches, and gradually separates the weakest target from the herd. Alone, the prey is vulnerable, easier to control, easier to manipulate, easier to break. This is exactly how a narcissist operates when they isolate you. Unlike more obvious forms of manipulation, isolation doesn't happen overnight. The narcissist doesn't start by saying, "You can't see your friends anymore." That would be too obvious, too easy to resist. Instead, they slowly, carefully create distance between you and the people who could help you see the truth. It starts with subtle comments. "I don't think your best friend really supports you," or "Your family is so toxic, they just stress you out." At first, these remarks don't seem controlling. They may even sound like concern. The narcissist might say they're just looking out for you, that they want to protect you from negative influences. Then they begin to shape how you feel about those closest to you. If your friend voices concern about the relationship, the narcissist will twist it. They're just jealous. They don't want you to be happy. If your family expresses worry, they'll say, "They never really understood you, did they? But I do." Little by little, you find yourself withdrawing. You stop sharing personal details with friends because you don't want to hear their criticism. You decline invitations to family gatherings because your partner doesn't like the drama. You feel like you're making these choices yourself, but in reality, they are being carefully orchestrated. As your world becomes smaller, the narcissist's influence grows stronger. Without the perspective of friends or family, you start to doubt your own reality. You lose the support system that might remind you of your worth, the people who could validate your feelings, the relationships that once gave you strength. And then the loneliness sets in. This is the cruel brilliance of isolation. It doesn't just make you emotionally dependent on the narcissist, it makes you fear leaving, because by the time you realize what has happened, you feel like you have nowhere else to go. The people who once cared for you seem distant, out of reach. You may even feel ashamed to reach out. What if they think I'm weak? What if they say, "I told you so"? Worse, the narcissist reinforces this belief. They remind you that no one else truly understands you. They make you feel as though they are the only person who will ever accept you, and so you stay. Not because you're happy, not because you believe they've changed, but because the outside world feels just as dangerous as the relationship itself. Breaking free from isolation. The first step to escaping isolation is recognizing it for what it is, a deliberate strategy to keep you vulnerable. If you notice that your world has grown smaller, that you have fewer connections than before, ask yourself, did I choose this, or was I guided here? Next, start reconnecting, slowly but intentionally. Send a message to a friend you lost touch with. Call a family member, even if it feels awkward. Reach out to a support group or therapist who can offer perspective. The narcissist may try to convince you that these people no longer care, but that is a lie designed to keep you trapped. Most importantly, remember that you are not alone. Isolation only works when you believe that no one will understand you, that you have no options. But the moment you reach out, even in the smallest way, you begin to break the illusion. Rebuilding a support system takes time, it takes courage. But every conversation, every connection, every step toward the outside world is a step toward reclaiming yourself. Because the truth is, you were never alone to begin with. You were only made to believe you were. Tactic 4. Projection. When they make you carry their sins. Imagine confronting someone about a betrayal. You have the facts, the evidence, the undeniable truth. But instead of acknowledging what they've done, they lash out at you. You're the liar, you always twist things, I can't believe you would accuse me like this. In an instant, the script has flipped. Instead of holding them accountable, you're now defending yourself. The conversation has shifted from their wrongdoing to your supposed flaws. You're scrambling to explain, to justify, to prove that you're not what they say you are, while they stand there, self-righteous, playing the victim. This is projection, one of the narcissist's most powerful weapons. It's not just about shifting blame, it's about making you carry the weight of their sins. By accusing you of the very things they are guilty of, they escape responsibility, distort reality, and leave you drowning in self-doubt. Projection isn't just a strategy, it's a way of life for narcissists. They cannot tolerate the idea of being flawed, of being wrong, of being exposed. So instead of facing their own reflection, they throw their darkness onto you. If they cheat, they accuse you of being unfaithful. If they lie, they call you dishonest. If they manipulate, they insist you are the one trying to control them. And the worst part? They say it with such conviction that you start to believe it. At first, it's shocking. How could they accuse you of something so absurd? But then, they keep repeating it. They say it with confidence, with anger, with absolute certainty. And suddenly, doubt creeps in. You find yourself wondering, am I really the problem? Did I overreact? Maybe I do get too emotional. Maybe I am selfish. The more they project, the more you internalize their accusations. Over time, your sense of self starts to erode. You begin to question your own character. You hesitate before speaking, afraid that anything you say will somehow confirm their claims. You become trapped in a cycle of self-defense, constantly proving your innocence while they walk away free of blame. This is the brilliance of projection. It doesn't just rewrite the narrative, it rewrites you. And as if that weren't enough, narcissists don't just convince you of their false accusations, they convince everyone around you. They spread their version of the story, painting themselves as the victim and you as the villain. Friends, family, even mutual acquaintances start looking at you differently. The more they repeat the lie, the more believable it becomes. Meanwhile, you're left feeling isolated, misunderstood, and utterly drained. So, how do you fight back? First, recognize the pattern. The moment you find yourself being accused of something completely out of character, stop and ask, is this actually me, or are they describing themselves? Narcissists have a tell. They accuse you of what they secretly fear being exposed for. If their accusations feel completely unfounded, chances are they're projecting. Second, refuse to play defense. The biggest mistake you can make is engaging with their false accusations. The moment you start explaining, proving, or justifying, you've already lost. Instead, redirect the focus. We're not talking about me right now. We're talking about your actions. That's funny because that sounds a lot like what you've been doing. I see what you're doing. You're shifting the blame to avoid accountability. Next, trust your reality. Gaslighting and projection go hand in hand. The narcissist wants to control the narrative so completely that you start believing their version of events over your own. Keep a record if necessary. Write down key conversations. Document patterns of behavior. Remind yourself of what you know to be true. And finally, detach emotionally. Projection is designed to provoke you, to make you react, to pull you into their game. The more you engage, the deeper you sink. But the moment you stop reacting, the moment you see their accusations for what they really are, desperate attempts to offload their own guilt, their power over you begins to fade. At its core, projection is a coward's tactic. It is the act of a person too fragile to face their own truth. But you are not their scapegoat. You are not responsible for their sins. And no matter how many times they try to rewrite the story, the truth remains. You know who you are. Their lies only have power if you accept them. So don't. Text 5. The silent treatment. When silence becomes psychological warfare, there is no rejection more painful than being ignored. The absence of words cuts sharper than insults, leaving you suspended in an emotional void, desperately searching for an explanation that never comes. You replay every conversation in your mind, trying to pinpoint the exact moment you must have done something wrong, struggling to fix something you don't even understand. And in that uncertainty, you surrender, apologizing, appeasing, bending to their will, just to make the silence stop. For a narcissist, silence is not just withdrawal, it is domination. It is the ultimate power play, a method of punishment that requires no yelling, no accusations. Unlike direct confrontation, which can be challenged, the silent treatment disguises itself as nothing at all. No argument, no discussion, just cold, calculated indifference that makes you feel small and invisible. At first, you assume they just need time. Maybe they're upset, maybe they're thinking things through, maybe they're trying to regulate their emotions. But as the silence stretches on, the truth becomes clear. This is not a pause for healing, it is a tool for control. They are not ignoring you because they are hurt. They are ignoring you to hurt you. Everything seems fine, and then suddenly they withdraw. Your messages go unanswered. Their gaze becomes distant, expression unreadable. When you try to engage, they respond with curt, emotionless words, or worse, with nothing at all. You find yourself spiraling into self-doubt. What did I do wrong? Did I cross some invisible boundary? Uncertain, you do the only thing that feels logical. You try to fix it. You apologize, even though you don't know what for. You soften your voice, adjust your behavior, make yourself smaller, just so they will acknowledge your existence again. Then, as if nothing ever happened, they start talking again. No explanation, no closure, just the unspoken reminder that you have been forgiven. You don't feel relief, you feel conditioned. You don't have to chase them. The more you beg for their attention, the more power you give them. Let them drown in their own silence. You do not need their validation to exist, and the next time they try to erase you with their silence, remember, their withdrawal does not define your worth. It only reveals their immaturity and inability to communicate with respect, and that is their failure, not yours. Tactic 6. Triangulation. When they turn people against you. There is nothing more disorienting than realizing that someone you trusted has been secretly manipulating others to turn against you. You feel blindsided, betrayed, wondering when everything changed, when the people who once understood you started looking at you with doubt in their eyes. Conversations that once felt warm now feel awkward and distant. Worst of all, you can't figure out why. This is triangulation, a deeply insidious manipulation tactic where the narcissist brings a third party into the dynamic to control you, create insecurity, or sow division. Instead of addressing conflicts directly, they pull in someone else, whether it's a friend, a family member, a co-worker, or even an ex. Stirring jealousy, planting seeds of doubt, or distorting your perception of reality. It begins subtly. They drop seemingly harmless comments. Your friend was asking me if something's wrong. They said you've been acting differently lately, or even your mum thinks you're overreacting. Suddenly, your personal struggles are no longer private. They've become part of the public narrative. Whether the statements are true doesn't matter. What matters is that a seed of doubt has been planted in your mind. Then they escalate. They tell others half-truths or outright fabrications, painting themselves as the victim while subtly casting you as the villain. If you confront them, they dismiss your concerns. "I never said that," or "You're just being paranoid." And just like that, you find yourself isolated, not because they pushed people away from you directly, but because they created a reality where you seem like the problem. Now, every interaction is laced with uncertainty. A lingering glance from a friend makes you wonder, have they heard something? Do they believe it? A sudden distance from a family member leaves you questioning, what did the narcissist tell them about me? If you try to explain yourself, it only makes things worse. Because they have already set the stage to make you look defensive, irrational, or paranoid, and the cruelest part, the narcissist never looks like the aggressor. They position themselves as the peacemaker, the voice of reason, the one who is just trying to help. While you struggle to understand what's happening, they sit back and watch, knowing they've successfully weakened your support system while tightening their control over you. The only way to break free is to refuse to play their game. When you notice someone suddenly forming an opinion about you that seems out of place, pause and ask yourself, do they truly feel this way, or has someone influenced them? If you sense distance growing between you and someone close, don't assume, go straight to the source. Instead of letting doubt fester, address it calmly. I've noticed some tension between us lately. Did someone say something about me? More often than not, the person will realize they've been manipulated too. And above all, remember this: your worth is not determined by their lies. The next time a narcissist tries to turn people against you, remind yourself, lies only have power if you believe them. Choose not to. If you've made it this far, then something inside you already knows the truth. This isn't love, this isn't respect, and this isn't the way a healthy relationship should feel. Narcissistic control isn't always loud, obvious, or violent. More often, it's a slow erosion of self. It's the constant second-guessing, the shrinking of your world, the quiet surrender of your voice, just to keep the peace. But here's what you need to remember. You were not made to live in fear. You were not put on this earth to walk on eggshells, to shrink yourself down, or to be at the mercy of someone else's mood. Your existence does not need to be earned. Your voice does not need to be silenced to make someone else feel powerful. And most importantly, you do not have to stay trapped in a cycle of manipulation. The moment you see the pattern, you begin to break it. The moment you name the abuse, you take back your reality. And the moment you decide that you are worth more than their control, you take the first step toward reclaiming your freedom. Healing is not easy. Walking away is not simple, but every step you take toward yourself is a step away from their grip, and no matter how much they've tried to make you doubt it, you are not weak for wanting better. You are strong for finally seeing through their game. So today, make a promise to yourself. Promise that you will trust your intuition, even when they try to make you doubt it. Promise that you will stop justifying their behavior and start protecting your own peace. Promise that you will choose yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels impossible, because you deserve a life where you don't have to fight to be heard, a life where love does not come with conditions, a life where your existence is enough, just as you are. And if no one has told you this yet today, let me be the first. You are worthy. You are strong, and you are not alone. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, you have the power to reclaim your story. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.